So bear with me for a moment while I savor this, because this is going to be one of the few times that a U.S. Senator is jealous of someone like me. Rand Paul is stuck on Capitol Hill with all the politicians. Meanwhile, I get to hang out with you, some of the coolest people on the planet. Sorry, Rand. So I'd like to test your economic knowledge. If I told you that on the way into the hotel today, I saw someone vandalizing your car, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing? I thought you people would know something about economics. That's a good thing. This so-called vandal, he's actually a hero. What he's doing is he is stimulating the economy. He's making work for body shops and tow truck drivers. You know what would be even better is if he actually totaled your car, because then he would be stimulating the entire automotive sector, the auto manufacturers and the car dealerships. What would be even better is if maybe a big hailstorm came through and damaged all the cars in the parking lots. That would be an exponential increase over the benefits provided by one lone individual. Or, even better than that, how about if a tornado swept through, wiped out all the cars and part of the hotel? Now, not only are we talking about the automotive industry, now we're also talking about construction, or even better, is war. Because, war wipes out the city, maybe parts of the country. I mean, think of all the jobs that would be created when we have to rebuild all this stuff. But the absolute best thing would be if aliens invaded. Intergalactic warfare would be the solution for all of our economic ailments. Now, I hope you guys realize that I am speaking ironically and sarcastically here. Nevertheless, what is particularly frightening is that a number of prominent mainstream economists, very influential opinion makers, subscribe to the view that the arbitrary destruction of capital and wealth is somehow an economic benefit. And in fact, the most famous of them did mention extraterrestrials. What I was just talking about is actually variations on the parable of the broken window from the essay That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Not Seen by the great French economist Frédéric Bastiat. The lesson of the broken window parable is very simple. When considering public policy, we must not only look at the immediate, apparent, and intended benefits of this policy, we must also consider the long-term, hidden, unintended, and often disastrous consequences of this policies. But once you start looking through the broken window, even though it's generally applied to economics, it can apply to anything. And once you learn how to look through the broken window, you undergo a paradigm shift. You begin to see the world as it could be. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about the world as I think it should be. My vision of utopia, the world according to the gracious and benevolent King Glenn I. People who do this are either delusional or they're blinded by hubris. What they never talk about is how they are going to impose their paradise, especially on those of us who don't particularly find their vision attractive. Well, here's a hint of how they're going to do it, and it has to do with the fact that government is unique among social institutions in that it is the only organization which claims the right to force everyone to do what it wants them to do. I'm talking about how the world could look if our legal system were based on one simple, universal moral concept. One, I think that many of you would agree, is a truism. No one has the right to initiate force against anyone else, even a group of individuals calling themselves the government and acting with the sanction of the majority. Put less formally, keep your mittens off other people and their stuff. What I'm talking about is how the world could look if liberty were dominant instead of statism. First of all, liberty would make us more prosperous. The free market generates the greatest amount of wealth and benefits the most people. Unfortunately, when we're advocating for the free market today, we run into the problem of fighting a straw man. As the left correctly points out, the current system is corrupt. The rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. But this argument is based on the assumption that our system is free market capitalism. It's not. While our system retains some of the characteristics of free market capitalism, the trend, which is accelerating, is towards crony capitalism, corporatism, or, put less politically correctly, corporate fascism. So I'm not defending the world as it is, simply describing it as it could be if liberty were dominant. One of the fundamental differences between leftist economists, if you want to call them that, and free market economists is how we view the nature of wealth. The left looks at wealth as a pre-existing feature of our world. According to the left, wealth is a pie, and everyone is fighting over their piece, their fair share. Hence the term redistribution of wealth. Well, wealth does not exist in this world on its own. Actually, humans decide what wealth is. Wealth is created when individuals transform the resources that nature gives us into a form that other people want. Hence, wealth is virtually infinite. The only limiting factor is the human imagination. Tragically, as high as our standards of living are today, they would be that much higher if the state were to just get out of the way. In the market, there's competition. And if an entrepreneur does not satisfy consumer preferences, he's out of there. He goes bankrupt. He goes into the dustbin. When the government provides services, there is no competition because generally the government declares it a monopoly. And folks, hate to break this to you, the government ain't never going to go bankrupt because they're just going to raise taxes on y'all, okay? So when the government provides services, there is no choice. It's take it or leave it. And as we found out with Obamacare, that's not even a choice anymore. More and more we're finding that we have to pay for things that we don't even want. I mean, imagine if the government ran the grocery stores like they did in the old Soviet Union. You would have one brand of every product. The politicians would set the price, and that price would always trend upwards because of the lack of competition and market innovation. And there would always be shortages because the price mechanism, which allows entrepreneurs to determine who needs what resources where, is missing. And those shortages hit. Instead of trying to get more stuff, the grocery store would just ration everything. But on the bright side, every 2 years, you would get to vote for the other brand, which in most cases is as distasteful as the brand that it replaces. But look at how our grocery stores run right now. Despite all the regulation, despite all the interference, you can get anything you want. You can even get all sorts of stuff that you didn't even know existed. Look at water. I mean, seriously, go down the grocery store to the water aisle. You have still water. You have mineral water. You have seltzer water. You have distilled water. You have spring water. You have water for infants. You have flavored water. You have vitamin-infused water. You have every sort of water you could possibly imagine. And do you think that if the store runs low on water, they're just going to say, oh, we can't get any more? No, they're going to be on the phone to the distributor and saying, hey, we need some more water. And it's going to be there as fast as possible. Now compare that with the way that the government delivers water, which ain't so great. In the market, people get what they want. When the government gets involved, we get bridges to nowhere, cash for clunkers, which hurt poor people by depleting the market of used cars, constant inflation and the subsequent lowering of our standards of living, and an endless series of booms and busts. When an entrepreneur fails, he goes out of business. When a politician fails, he goes to K Street and makes a couple $1 million a year. And all of this is happening while the middle class is being crushed by an ever-increasingly onerous tax burden. So I'd like to ask a question about that. Who do you think takes better care of your money? You? Or some politician in Washington, D.C., or your state capital, or city hall? I know where I vote on that one. The only way to get rich in the market is to create things that other people want. The motivational speaker and sales guru Zig Ziglar said it best: you can have anything you want so long as you help enough other people get what they want. You see, the market unifies us. If you want to be successful in the market, you must serve other people. Government divides us. I mean, isn't this the nature of political parties and political campaigns? The population is broadly divided into two groups, and then they're pitted against one another. Meanwhile, politicians champion one group while demonizing the other. If these guys get control, they're going to do this to you. I'm going to protect you from them. What could possibly be more divisive than that? And our current paradigm reinforces this worldview. When the government dictates everything from how much money it's going to take from you through taxation to how much water your toilet can use, I mean, yeah, if the other guy, the enemy, gets control, that's a real threat because they can control every aspect of your life. How would things be if political power were diminished? What would it be like if it didn't matter who held political office because, oh, I don't know, they followed the Constitution, which I know is really naive and, an anachronism at this point, but I think is a pretty cool idea. What would things look like if politicians didn't exert so much influence in your life? What if we dropped the labels that politics puts on us? Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, whatever. What if we saw each other as people, as human beings? What if deep down we realized that all of us really want the same thing, a decent standard of living for ourselves and for our children? What if we saw some of ourselves in other people instead of this divisiveness which we have going on right now? Wouldn't we be more empathetic towards one another? Wouldn't we be more caring towards one another when we really realize that we're pretty much the same? See, I believe that if we want to make the world a better place, we have a moral responsibility to do that ourselves, and I think that many of you here probably agree with that. I mean, who else is going to do it? But that doesn't mean that I think that the government has the right to make us pay for its social welfare programs. Far from it. These programs do not make us more caring and more compassionate. They breed resentment. They're just another way that the government divides us and pits us against one another. The objective of welfare programs, government welfare programs, is not to help the poor. It's to exploit the plight of the poor for the benefit of the politicians. these programs encourage dependency and learned helplessness. And unfortunately, often the people who really need help end up falling through the cracks and have to fend for themselves. And I know this firsthand. My wife worked in social services for many years and has all sorts of stories about that. So the solution to the social welfare programs is not to have the government do it. Of course, it's private enterprise. But before you think that, this guy hates the poor, nothing could be further than the truth. I hate the fact that people are poor. If you want to fix that, unleash the free market and allow it to do what it does best, generate wealth for everybody. And I believe that decent people, people like you and me, will provide for those folks who can't help themselves. You see, the difference between us, people like you and I, and the political elites is that I trust the common person to do the right thing. The political elites do not. One of the excuses offered by apologists for big government is that the government, the state, protects us from all sorts of boogeymen, especially unscrupulous capitalists who exploit consumers and the environment, leaving a path of destruction and pollution in their wake. But the facts tell a different story. First of all, it's the state which empowers these so-called capitalists, who are actually cronyists, by removing the checks and balances inherent in the free market. For instance, let's look at the financial crisis of 2008. Instead of allowing the politically connected banks to go bankrupt, to go out of business, the government stepped in and showered them with hundreds of billions of dollars in bailout funds. Likewise, instead of allowing GM to go bankrupt, in which case its assets would have been liquidated and bought by more competent managers at fire sale prices, resulting in cheaper cars for all of us, the government rescued GM to the tune of billions of dollars. Or let's turn our attention to the environment. You see, it's not only in the economy that the government is dangerous. The myth is that the government is the great protector of our environment. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the world's governments are actually notorious polluters. Why is that? Because they're not accountable to anyone. They don't answer to anyone. For instance, where I live in Tennessee, many of you may have heard about this coal ash spill near Kingston, Tennessee. It was an ecological disaster. If this catastrophe had been caused by a private company, there would have been heavy fines and someone would have went to jail. Instead, because the culprit was the Tennessee Valley Authority, a federally owned corporation, there was a lot of hemming and hawing and a lot of nail biting, but in the end, no one was punished. Or let's look overseas. Let's look at the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. I'm a big proponent of nuclear energy, actually. If we're thinking about the world as how it could be, imagine the world without electricity for a second. It's impossible. Our world could not work without electricity. And I realize that you just don't create electricity with the snap of your fingers. You need something, and nuclear power is a very viable option. However, there is no doubt that nuclear power is dangerous. So why isn't there a better way? Well, there is, or there might be. One option is thorium-based nuclear reactors. Any of you know about thorium? Thorium is abundant in nature. A thorium reactor will not melt down, and a thorium reactor would produce a fraction of the radioactive waste that a conventional uranium-based reactor will. So why don't we have thorium? Well, it all goes back to the Cold War. You see, the governments of the world backed uranium-based nuclear reactors because they were interested in the waste product, the quote-unquote waste product that uranium-based reactors produce, plutonium, which is used in nuclear weapons. So think about that for a moment. Instead of pursuing a technology which might possibly provide virtually limitless, clean, safe energy, the world's governments embrace a technology which would give them the potential to destroy the globe many times over. Now, do you still think that the state is interested in your safety and security, or is that just an excuse? Liberty makes us more prosperous and caring as a society. Liberty makes us safer and more secure. Isn't it high time that we reject the false promises, the siren song of statism, and demand the birthright of all humanity, our birthright, liberty and freedom, and the blessings that they bestow? Thank you all very much. Let's have a great time.